Hi, this is Michael Paul, New Orleans Scottish Rite College. I want to talk today about some emails that I've received over the last few months. And most of these had to do with a change that a number of Grand Lodges have recently made over the last few years, having to do with how they conduct business. And it deals with the concept of change, and is change necessary? Is the change important? Should we change? Should we stay like we are? And so forth. And I'd like to talk a little bit about it. Now this is a pencil, and it's an ingenious invention. On one end you have a sharp point. It used to be lead, I think it's carbonite now, and with it you can write down whatever you want. If you want to do something calculus, or if you want to write an essay or a love note, whatever you wanted to write, you can write with this pencil. The other end is an eraser. You use it if you write something and make a mistake. This eraser will eliminate it. Now, Grand Lodges operate pretty much the same way. They can make whatever decision they want. They can write any laws that they want, govern themselves how they see fit. And if down the line, at some point they realize, oops, well, this is not actually serving us as best as it should, or how we expected, they can go back and they can change that law. They can go back and set things up like it used to be, or they can do something completely different. That's the benefit of being a sovereign and independent Grand Lodge. They can write whatever laws they want, and at any time, if it doesn't turn out as they expected, they can go back and change these laws. That's their prerogative. Now, for a good many years, business that's been conducted in a lodge has always been conducted in the Master Mason degree. Over the last 10, 12 years or so, a number of jurisdictions in the United States decided that they wanted to change this, and they wanted to conduct business in Entered Apprentice degree, Fellowcraft degree, or Master Mason degree. Most of these jurisdictions who have changed felt that there should be something that should be left up to the worshipful master of the lodge. Today we have about half of the jurisdictions in the United States that have made this change. And there's debate. Should this be done? Should it be Master Masons only? Why? Is this beneficial? Is it harmful? A lot of discussion on it. And I wanted to look a little bit at the history of this and why it was done, and the fact that no, this is not the way it has always been done. We have not always done business in the Master Mason degree. And why did it become the norm? And what's the benefit of change? What's the benefit of remaining as it is? Prior to the 1840s, most jurisdictions in the United States had something of a hands-off attitude towards lodges under their jurisdictions, and many of these jurisdictions had lodges working, doing business on the Master Mason degree, some of them on the Fellowcraft degree, pretty much whatever the lodge wanted to do. In 1843, there was a convention held in Baltimore, Maryland, and it's normally known as the Baltimore Convention, but actually it was a number of conventions between 1843 and 1847. And during that time, a lot of things were hammered out as far as what Grand Lodges desired to participate in and what they wanted to have as the norm for Masonic jurisdictions in the United States. They had rekindled an effort to have a general Grand Lodge of the United States. This was voted down wisely, but there were other very useful things that were done. One was dues cards. They decided that it was beneficial for lodges to have dues cards, and I doubt that any jurisdiction would, in the United States at least, would do away with dues cards at this date. But there were some things that were a bit of a hard sell. One of them was it was felt that business of a lodge should be the concern only of Master Masons, and that a lodge of Master Masons should be the only lodge in which business of the lodge should be discussed. Entered Apprentice Masons and Fellowcraft Masons should not be part of this process. And it was an interesting concept because it had a lot of assumptions that were made. The assumption was that entered apprentice masons and fellow craft masons were part of the business decision making and such. And this is what I'd like to talk about a little bit and explore how things used to be done in the early days, and some misconceptions that we've had over the years and assumptions that have been made. Since I'm most familiar with Louisiana and the masonry that has been practiced here since the very early days, I'll deal with this. Louisiana was not part of the Baltimore conventions. We never did send any representatives there. And from the earliest days that we can see, until 1850, lodges had the option of working in the entered apprentice degree, or they could conduct business on the fellow craft degree or the master mason degree. It was whatever the lodge chose to do. And there was certain requirements that were made. There was an attitude in Louisiana that carried over from French Freemasonry. And certain elements of French Freemasonry have remained the same in the early days as they are now. And one aspect is the role of an entered apprentice mason and the role of a fellow craft mason. And that is, they ought to learn, period. That's all they do, is learn until they complete their master mason degree, and then they participate in the lodge. And what this means in an actual sense within a lodge, the lodge in France would allow an apprentice to come in. They would encourage them to come in, but they sat in one area and they did not speak. They were not privy to, or they did not have the benefit or the privilege of speaking and voicing their opinion or asking questions in open lodge. Their duty in a lodge was to sit there and listen, observe, gather all they can, and if they were called upon, then they should give their opinion if it was requested. Now, entered apprentice masons, for example, as well as fellow craft, they were often assigned certain tasks, educational tasks. They would have to present a paper, for example, on an aspect of the entered apprentice degree or the fellow craft degree, whatever degree they were working in, and then this paper would be challenged by the master masons in the lodge. If one was giving an entered apprentice degree paper, a fellow craft mason still, while he was senior to the entered apprentice mason, he did not have the privilege of challenging that paper. That was reserved to the master masons. Entered apprentice masons served on no committees. They held no offices. Their job in lodge was simply to learn. The job of the lodge itself was to teach. And it was this relationship that Freemasonry existed in the early days of Louisiana. Now, in Louisiana, there was a great turmoil that developed in the mid-1800s. And there was the French Freemasonry, and then there was the American Freemasonry. Louisiana had not participated in the Baltimore Convention. A lot of the things that were standard when someone was visiting a lodge in one state or another state, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, they wouldn't find in Louisiana. They'd come to New Orleans, usually on business, usually from the Mississippi River, or however they came here, and they would go into a lodge. They'd see lodges working in different languages. They'd see lodges working in different rituals. They would see lodges of the entered apprentice degree. They would see things that they would not see elsewhere, and it became a problem. And this resulted in a turmoil. And in 1847, a second Grand Lodge was created in Louisiana, and after much debate and struggle, this Grand Lodge and the Grand Lodge of Louisiana merged in 1850, and really this new Grand Lodge took over the old Grand Lodge, and a lot of the old practices that were held by Louisiana were pushed aside. Some of the changes were lodges would conduct business from then on only on the Master Mason degree. Past masters, which prior to that time were considered life members of the Grand Lodge, had no more membership in the Grand Lodge. This means they were allowed to vote in Grand Lodge. A past master was given a vote for any Grand Lodge. The vote was taken away. There was a lot of changes that took place, and the changes were designed to make Louisiana Masonry more in line with the Masonry of the rest of the United States. So basically, in a nutshell, Masonry prior to 1846, 1843, the 1840s, the Baltimore Convention, practiced Masonry pretty much as the jurisdiction felt. After 1840s, it became far more standardized. And one of the more standard practices that you saw was that business was conducted on the Master Mason degree. Louisiana, it was a little bit later, 1850, where Masonry changed from being conducted on the Entered Apprentice degree or Fellowcraft degree to the Master Mason degree. And this change has remained pretty much set until 10, 12 years ago. The question now becomes, why would they change this? And what's the benefit for having a lodge do business on the Entered Apprentice degree? Is it worth a change? And what does it mean to Grand Lodges or lodges if this change takes place? If we go back to the post-World War II time, there was an explosion of Masonry. We've talked about this in other videos. After the explosion happened and a large increase in members, Masonry started to decline again. By the 1970s or so, Masonry in most jurisdictions began to see a large decline in membership. And there were various reasons that were attributed to this decline in membership. Maybe we're doing this wrong, maybe this should be done wrong. But the bottom line is that over the last 10, 12 years, there's been a reevaluation of sorts within most jurisdictions. They've come to realize that the Masons who are joining and not remaining are wanting something from Masonry that's not being given. And the overall answer to what's desired is education. Masons are actually individuals are joining Masonry because they believe something that they've read or watched on TV or some video or someone that they know, and they have an image of joining a lodge to gain personal enlightenment, to gain something, an education, an awareness. It seems that Masonry teaches something that's important, and it's true. Masonry in its teachings, its symbolic method of education, allows us, when we teach and when we practice Masonry, to improve our lives. The Masonic alchemy, taking something less and making it better, taking a good man and improving him. That's the Masonic alchemy. It's a factual situation, and it is a factual aspect of Freemasonry if it's practiced. The problem for most jurisdictions are that when this decline in membership started, everything fell apart. Education was lax. Every aspect of Freemasonry began to crumble little by little. And today we have an aspect where we see a revolving door of members. A young man believes something about Masonry and he'll join. And when he gets into the lodge, he sees just reading of the minutes, talking about the air condition breaking, or some minor aspect, a closing ritual, and then donuts and coffee, maybe a meal. And he realizes that not only is this not enlightening, it's not even really interesting. And they could have better entertainment reading a book at home or watching a movie. So you have one group of individuals who join and then immediately say, I made a mistake. This is not what I thought, and they leave. But the more important group is the ones who remain. Because the young men who remain in Masonry, and maybe they feel something that beyond the reading of the minutes, there's something there that maybe they can still, there's hope that they can grab something. When these young men join, if they show any interest or inkling or desire to be part of Masonry, they're immediately grabbed. And before the ink on their dues card is even dry, they're in an office. And before they understand the difference between speculative Masonry and operative Masonry, they're master of the lodge. They're overwhelmed. They have the natural talent. They have the interest. But because they're rushed through the chairs, they don't get the experience and the seasoning that is necessary for a worshipful master of the lodge, and then they make mistakes. I have personally seen a number of individuals who had great amount of personal potential, and they were eager, they were interested, but they had no training, and they were immediately rushed into positions of authority, and they didn't know how to handle the positions of authority, and some of them are no longer Masons now. And it is not a good thing. It is possibly the worst thing that can be done to a very interested new Mason. And this is one of the problems that can be traced in part to the lack of experience and the not being aware of what you have. If a lodge decided to change its practices, and if a jurisdiction, really, a Grand Lodge voted to change from meeting on the Master Mason degree and doing business on the Master Mason degree to the Entered Apprentice degree, if the lodges practiced this and simply changed a degree from Master Mason to Entered Apprentice and changed nothing else, it's a waste. It means nothing. But if a lodge, especially a lodge that does not have a lot of members attending and they do not get many petitions, if this lodge takes an Entered Apprentice Mason and allows him to see the operation of the lodge, and if that lodge presents papers, has educational programs, if a candidate is an Entered Apprentice Mason for 6 months, 8 months, that's 6 or 8 months worth of meetings that they can attend, that they can see actually the opening and closing, how lodges operate, how votes are taken, how all of these, even though they don't take part in any of this, they just sit there and observe this. And if they have the additional benefit of programs that they can witness, they will benefit from this. And by the time they are a Master Mason, they will be better prepared for holding an office. They will have whatever amount of months that they have gone through between their degrees. They will have this seasoning for the lodge, and they can take that benefit with them and that extra experience with them when they do advance. The arguments that are made against lodges doing business in the Entered Apprentice degree are sometimes valid, sometimes they're subjective. I've read cases where the objection originally from the 1840s was that it was perceived to be improper. Why is it improper? It's a subjective choice. It was never fully answered. In Louisiana, we have variations from the norm set by the Baltimore Convention. Our 16th district, our Scottish Rite district, is in itself a diversion from the norm in that we have these lodges practice the Scottish Rite craft ritual. In these lodges, they, interestingly enough, I've heard in the past some individuals object to doing business on the Master Mason in the Entered Apprentice degree because there was a believed perception that it was impossible for a Scottish Rite Lodge to conduct business on the Entered Apprentice degree. It's done in France, and it was done in Louisiana until 1850. The problem is there are certain ceremonies and signs reserved for Master Masons, and they are reserved for Master Masons. If you are in the Entered Apprentice degree, you give the signs and words and practices of an Entered Apprentice, and anything that's reserved for Master Masons is reserved for Lodge of Master Masons. But even in the Scottish Rite Lodges themselves, they have an area that is a carryover from where the Entered Apprentice Masons used to sit. It's northeast corner. Entered Apprentice Masons who would come into the lodge, if you were an Entered Apprentice, you were directed to that area of the lodge. That's where you sat. That's where you watched. That's where you kept quiet. You watched what was going on. If you were asked a question, you would answer. Other than that, you were not entitled to ask questions or to speak your mind or voice an opinion if a discussion was going on. You didn't give your opinion because you have not yet a Master Mason and have not earned that right to speak in a lodge of Masons. And this is one of the interesting aspects and the misunderstandings of how lodges used to operate and how they could operate. Now, a valid objection to doing business on the Entered Apprentice degree would be if Entered Apprentice Masons were allowed to serve on committees or hold office or speak their mind or enjoy all the other privileges of Master Masons. Then that would defeat the whole purpose of advancing through degrees. You might as well remain an Entered Apprentice Masons forever. Part of the pleasure of advancing is not only in the education aspect, but to realize that these degrees mean something, and to instill in the Entered Apprentice Mason a desire to participate in the lodge. And that's one of the benefits of their being in a business meeting, that they can see what goes on and interest can be built that they would participate in and have a voice in the future of this lodge, which is their lodge. It would be a mistake, however, and it would be a great mistake, to believe that a change in who can attend business meetings is some sort of magic bullet. Changing who can attend a business meeting, if that's the only change that's going to be made, it will accomplish very little. It will simply be a change in practice, but there'll be no real benefit, and if there's no real benefit, it'll be seen as a waste of time, and why did we do it? We need to reevaluate the importance of education in Masonic lodges. If we can bring in Entered Apprentice Masons, have them learn and participate in the lodge from witnessing, observing, learning, giving papers themselves, hearing papers delivered, going through the educational practices. By the time they advance through the degrees and earn their Master Mason degree, they will be a far more experienced new Master Mason than the new Master Masons whose only experience in lodge has been 2 meetings where they were the candidate, and that's all they know of first-hand experience. The level of experience and the level of confidence and the level of knowledge will be so much greater for the new Master Mason who has attended all of the lodges leading up to his degree. This is one of the benefits. My personal opinion is that if education takes place and if a lodge is capable of having an Entered Apprentice or Entered Apprentices or Fellowcrafts as well in lodge for the business meeting, and if they can do the work of the lodge as far as education, then there is a benefit to everyone. There's a benefit to the EAs and Fellowcrafts, there's a benefit to the lodge, there's a benefit all the way around the block, yes, I support that. No, I do not support just simply having a lodge and making a change with nothing else. It has to be the whole educational package, or it means nothing. Thank you for watching. I appreciate any views that you have. Please send emails. Let me hear from you. If you have any questions, please send them on, and I look forward to talking with you next time.